Don't announce your engagement at someone else's wedding, or this might just happen to you. Last summer I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, who I'll call Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife, I'll call her Emma, didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation. This is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their baskets to blue ones she had secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it or let the bride see them until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme, but of course she didn't say anything about it in the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids were also Emma's friends, had attended Emma's wedding, and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen, displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen, and at first she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple light-hearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant, and that she'd just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide? Her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly that I sincerely regret watching the Snapchat recordings with headphones. Apparently Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing the others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle. I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore. Our self-important bridesmaid announces her engagement at my cousin's wedding, stealing the spotlight from him and his bride. Said bridesmaid foolishly names my cousin's wife her maid of honor and behaves like a complete bridezilla. Cousin's wife sabotages her wedding to announce her own pregnancy. Edit, thank you, kind stranger, for the gold. Edit 2, oh wow, silver too. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. Yet another edit, platinum. Huge thanks to everyone for the kindness. Move on to the comment. I'll never understand why people who hate each other so deeply remain friends with one another. I'd give you gold, my friend, but I don't have money. Take my upvote instead. Edit, thank you kind strangers for giving him/her shiny things. And also for my first ever gold. It's because most people would rather remain complacent instead of ending friendships. I just nuked 2 extremely unhealthy friendships from orbit and I feel great. I think it's because, for a lot of people can't stand to be on their own. I know a lot of people who would never go to an event, party, just shopping etc. on their own. When I was growing up, I never had friends, so I was forced to learn to be content with my own company. Some never learned to be on their own. Oh God, same. Killed an entire friend group that was just constantly putting me down. Would tell me they were on my side but then outright telling me I need therapy because I blow up at the smallest issues. Talking to anyone in that group about anything confrontational was like the airplane scene with Adam Sandler in Anger Management. In the end, I did go to therapy, but it was to deal with them, not myself. My therapist thought they were all narcissists, LMAO. Look, I'm sure there is more to the story than the couple of sentences you posted, but a group of friends suggesting therapy for a problem you have is not necessarily putting you down, and certainly can come from people on your side. Sounds more like an intervention, which people generally do out of concern. But then, people who blow up at the smallest issues probably aren't going to see things that way. I didn't have a problem with them suggesting therapy, but they would suggest it for everything, and their advice for everything was the nuclear option. Roommate and I had an argument and they wanted me to move out and completely avoid her. We talked it out and we're fine now. They tried to convince me it wasn't fine and I wouldn't last living with her till fall. She's been perfect. I had a disagreement with my new boss. Time to quit my job despite getting insurance, paid holiday, vacation, and being paid reasonably for the position. I talked to my boss and we're fine now, and I received a raise this year. The worst was when my best friend became depressed and they tried to tell me that she was a horrible influence on me and would openly make displays of ignoring her when she would talk. They told me I needed to cut her from my life. She's now the reason I consider myself alive. Keeping up appearances. Imagine being in a place where the narrative of your life is more important than actual relationships, and you get this. I don't really understand. Who are they keeping up appearances for? That's a great question, and likely to vary from person to person. In the context of this story, it's clear that everyone involved is from a tightly knit community, bride and groom that were childhood friends, friends that seem to have had the same wedding parties, etc. In that sort of environment, you don't want to be the person that gets cast out, whether by choice or not. It takes something nuclear like what Op's cousin did to change things. That's just my read on this situation anyway. Stubbornness. The amount of times you hear people say they never talk to so and so after their wedding is insane. Even when they're in the wedding party. Well, as someone who dealt with this, it's really not that easy. I had a lot of friends from this type of situation. We were from a small town. But there were some in the group who always made me feel like crap about myself. And I would get sick of it and stop interacting with them. But most of the people I knew all hung out together, so if I wanted to cut the toxic people out, I had to cut the other out as well, because they were willing to put up with that kind of abuse. And for a while it's nice, but after a time the loneliness sets in. That social isolation is hard to handle long term. This makes a lot of people go back, since it's often easier than making a new group of friends. I went back multiple times for years. Only through the last 2 have I kept them out of my life and started to rebuild my social circle. But it's still hard. I've made a couple new good friends, but no one I'm as close to as that old group, because the history isn't there and that takes years to rebuild. I still have to stop myself from reaching out and letting these people back into my life. I get and understand that. I felt that way when I was younger and had no job and just sat at home on my computer, but instead I just used that time to learn new trades and skills. It also builds up your ability to be content to be alone. You won't be lonely forever, even though it seems like it. Situations change, new people in and out of your life. I gotta say though, cutting toxic people out of my life has made it infinitely better than if those people were still there. Also, let me note, not trying to tell you how to live, just think alone time, in moderation, can be a temporary alternative to hanging out with toxic people. It's hard to make friends. Sometimes I'd be willing to be friendly with somebody who can be a senseless bitch/prick at times, just to actually have somebody to grab a coffee/beer with. Maybe some people hang on to shitty friends because they haven't made good ones, or because they've grown accustomed. Kinda like an old ratty jacket. Yep, I completely relate to this. The main thing I look for in a friend, that they want to be a friend with me. Can't be a choosing beggar about it. Can't be a